couple of minutes after the hour, a cold 24 degrees in downtown Sylacauga. Mike Landers joins us this morning. Mike, been a long time. Good morning.
Well, Jimmy, you know, I try not to go where I'm not wanted. You hadn't invited me in a while,
so we have to watch our step.
I understand. So, sometimes I'm considered toxic.
That's what I've heard. So how long ago when you ran for council?
5 years ago.
Okay.
You know, this council has gotten an extra year because there was a change in election date for municipal elections. They wanted to get them off the presidential year. So this group has had a 5-year term to work their magic.
So what is going on at City Hall? I mean, I know you kept close tabs on it. What is your take on this?
Well, my take would simply be this, that it may have been the most dysfunctional city council we've ever had. If you've noticed, they don't get along with each other. And apparently, in some cases, they don't get along with the public when they come to see them. You've seen those episodes where it almost was if the leadership of the council was rude to the constituency. And the one thing I always say about folks in the political world is you have to recognize that with a political job comes criticism. Hey, I get criticism and don't even have a political job. So, but sometimes I kind of judge how well I'm doing by the criticism I get and how the people are reacting to what I'm doing. Now, our council has been a lot of infighting down there. They have voted one in 1 month, and 2 or 3 months later, they didn't like the way they were signing the checks, or they didn't trust them to sign the checks, or whatever the problem was. Then we had to get somebody else. And then we decide that we're going to fire an employee, and this is the mayor's office. They decide they're going to fire an employee when, in fact, they can't fire the employee because they didn't hire the employee. These are systemic problems down there right now. At one point back during the term of this council, one council member filed criminal charges against other.
Right.
I don't know where that's gone. That may have just gone the way of the westward wind. You don't ever know. But they're a mighty self-righteous bunch down there. They can tell you what they're doing right, but I'll tell you one thing that they've done that scares the heck out of me. When we go out a city of this size and we borrow $30 or $40 million to build not a sports complex, but an aquatic complex and some pickleball courts, and of course they're going, as they always do, they're going to pave a few roads right before election time, so they're going to use some of this borrowed money. That's a pile of money for a little town like this that can rely on nothing but sales taxes. And it's conventional wisdom, Jimmy, that anytime you have a new president take office, you're going to have a little bit of a recession. There's just going to be a little slump. Well, I don't expect this to be any different. Well, what's the first thing to suffer in terms of revenue when you have a recession? Discretionary spending. Well, all of our revenue for the city here is based on sales taxes. Mm-hmm. So if the economy dips, what happens to sales taxes? They dip. And then, of course, one of my pet peeves down there at City Hall and with any municipal government is when you say, we're going to give retail an incentive we're going to cut their taxes. We're not going to make them pay sales taxes on the Sylacauga part of their sales taxes because we want them to locate here. Hey, everybody enjoys a new restaurant. Everybody enjoys a new store. But you don't develop real economic growth in a community, in a town, in a city, in a county, in a state, in a country based on retail sales.
So how do you do it?
Then you do it on creating economic development, and you look at what we've got out there, the quarries. The quarries are actually the highest paying jobs in Talladega County. Folks think it's Honda. The highest paying hourly manufacturing jobs are right here in Sylacauga. What you do is you push the marble industry. You push it and you try to get people to locate here like the shingle plants that need that product. That product's incredibly heavy, so it's costly to ship. Logistics are a big problem. But if they could turn the tap on and have instant demand to the slurry they need to make plastics, to make medicines, to make paints, to make pills, to make gypsum board, whatever they're going to make, they need to be right here in Sylacauga. And then you create real jobs. You create $35, $40, $45 an hour jobs. But when you create retail jobs, What you do is you create a job over here at Hamburger Y and you take it away from Chicken X. Well, they don't pay anymore over here, but folks go over here and try this as a job. Well, they're going to make $15 an hour. And hey, there's many a time you and I would have loved to have seen $15 an hour, but it ain't today. But the problem with that is that you create no growth because that guy making $15 an hour or that girl, yeah, they need to work, and I'm proud they're working, and I appreciate anybody that'll work. But they can't buy a new car. They can't buy a new house because they just don't have the cash flow stream to do it. So we don't need to worry about retail jobs. If we have a thriving economic, diverse industrial economy here, folks will come here. You won't have to be recruiting folks to come and put up a chicken franchise or a hunting store or whatever you want, or a bargain store. You won't have to do that. You've got to create meaningful, though.
But this city hasn't grown in a while.
No, we've lost population. And in addition to losing population, one of the problems we've had, and this is common in all cities, but as your jobs, your high-paying jobs leave, or as your high-paid people leave, then what you have left behind are the disadvantaged people. Now, wait a minute. I'm not criticizing the disadvantaged people, because where you and I grew up in the country, nobody knew if you were disadvantaged or not. We were all disadvantaged. But the problem with that is that it takes tax revenue. It takes property taxes to support our schools, and we've maxed out on property taxes on schools. So we've got to look at a way to draw people in and give them jobs here, and it can't be low-pay jobs. And we have not done that in years and years. And I hear folks in government say, well, we're developing the 280 corridor out there. There's some truth to that it needs to be developed as much as it can. But I can assure you, if I'm driving through Sylacauga and I'm headed to Auburn or I'm headed to Columbus, I don't really stop in Sylacauga to shop. I go to my destination. If I'm headed to Tuscaloosa to a ball game or whatever, I don't stop in Centerville because I'm headed to my destination. So that's kind of a myth out there to talk about that. Now, you've got Home Depot out there, the big box store. You've got Publix out there. You've got Walmart. But I've never thought you could really rely on them too much, because what happens with the big box stores is they have all the power. And if Walmart suddenly said, I need a 2% cut on my sales tax in Sylacauga, they can go right up the street, and I bet you Oak Grove would be happy to have them, or they can go right down 280 outside the city limits. You can't build an economy on retail alone. We've got to have an industrial base, and we've got the perfect opportunity. I've always said that we ought to be exploiting those quarries right here, and we ought to create some incentives, and that takes a joint effort. It would take a joint effort between the county and the city and the state. But now I'm going to tell you, there's a good example of just such a partnership right now in Sylacauga that's doing that. Margaret Morton with SAFE and her Earth project down there. What a great idea, because I'm going to tell you what it's going to do, and it's going to do something you and I thought would never be done in our lifetime. It's going to revitalize the mill village. That's the whole thing.
That's almost unthinkable.
It's almost unthinkable, but it's going to happen because of Margaret Morton. Somebody asked me one time, who ought to be mayor in Sylacauga? Well, it changes with the circumstances that exist in Sylacauga, but right now there is a mess down there at City Hall that is similar to me, and you'll notice I've got my Make America
I did notice that, yes.
My Make America Great. But there's a similar mess, just not the same scale, but the similar mess right here in Sylacauga that President Trump's having to deal with in Washington. And that is, you've got to drain the swamp. You've got to let people know that, hey, we're being good stewards with your money. We're working hard to give you good services, but we can't do everything for everybody. And we've got to clean up the waste. I was thinking about these millions of dollars that we've borrowed here in Sylacauga for this development of the aquatic complex and what they're going to do with that. You know, what you don't realize about that is you say, I'm borrowing $40 million or I'm borrowing $30 million. Well, I've got $30 million to spend on making Sylacauga better. Not quite, because the bond lawyers are going to take a percentage. The borrower's lawyers are going to take a percentage. The debtor's lawyers are going to take a percentage. So let's say that comes to 10%. So there's $3 or $4 million going right off the top. Then we've got all the consultants that have got to get in there to make sure everybody does due diligence. We've got the surveyors, we've got the EPA folks, we've got all these folks that have got to come in and take a look at it. So another $4 or $5 million gone. Then we've got to pay the architects to develop these programs, and we've got to pay a profit on a contractor. Well, suddenly, and there's nothing wrong with that, that's a free economy, but you say, well, we've got $30 million, we borrowed $30 million to spend. Well, suddenly we're down to less than 20 to spend, but we owe 30, and there's a meter ticking at the rate of $1.2 million, $1.5 million, $1.5 million, $1.7 million, $2 million a year. And folks say, well, why didn't you do more? Well, you can go back and borrow more. I doubt the city can go borrow anymore. We got to pay some off before we can go borrow anymore. But those are the things I'm talking about. There's got to be a better way to do it.
So and I understand what you're saying, but, you know, are you against the aquatic center or the timing of it, or what?
I'm against the timing of it because it was not the right time to jump in when you knew there was a presidential election and you knew there was going to be a lot of uncertainty. And I guess my next question would be, why is this the time now? Because they've had this opportunity in better times in years past. You know, all my lifetime and your lifetime, while your kids were growing up and mine were growing up, they always talked about a sports complex.
Yeah.
They never did anything, but they talked about it, and they talked about it a lot at election time. And you have to look at the timing of these projects. This comes in the 5th year of a council that has been pretty much known for doing nothing. And that offends every one of them when I say that. And that's all right. I had one councilman say, well, you know, you talk about us mighty bad. And I said, well, part of the $800 a month you're getting gives me the privilege to talk about you because you're getting paid by the people to do your job. Well, if you can't stand the heat, you know, Harry Truman said it best, just get the hell out of the kitchen. Well, I'm a kind of a kitchen guy. It can't get too hot for me. You know, Jimmy, the last thing in the world that is good for me is to give all the naysayers out there about Mike Landers free shots at me. But I value those people's opinion so little because they've never put their name on a ballot. They've never stepped up and said, yeah, I made a mistake. Yeah, I did something wrong, but I paid the price for it. I went through the process to get it cleaned up. I had to spend my money to clear up my problem. I had to fix my problem. I had to go through all the hoops that the state required me to go through. I had to ask the state of Alabama to give me a pardon. And primarily I had to ask the Lord to give me one for the mistakes I made. And of course, I'll tell you what, the Lord will give you a pardon when nobody else will. The state of Alabama's a little tougher. But, you know, by the grace of God, I don't owe anybody anything. The state of Alabama has restored every right I ever had from, I've got a gun right here in my pocket right now. Every gun right, every political right, every voting right I ever had. And if anybody wants to check that, they can call the Board of Pardons and Paroles. But, you know, I don't try to run from my past, but I'll tell you what I know. Most of the time, due to my experience and due to my career, I have a pretty good understanding of what it takes to make government tick. And I don't want to go down to City Hall, and I hadn't made an announcement about this yet. But
I was about to say, it sounds like you may have some answers, but you know, are you saying that I'm going to run for office or what?
Well, I have waited, and you have asked me about this before, and I have waited to make an announcement because I had hoped that there was somebody going to step up and run for mayor that I thought was going to be the answer to Sylacauga's problems. And it hasn't happened. So yes, I'm running for mayor. I'll say it today. I'm going to run for mayor, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to run for mayor because I don't want to be your golfing buddy. I don't want to be your drinking buddy. I don't want to be your deacon at church. I don't want to be your preacher at church. I want to be your mayor, and I want to be the best mayor I can be, and I want to fix what's wrong at Sylacauga. Now, you know, I'm 68 years old. It's not old, but it ain't a spring chicken. So I want one term down there to clean up down there, get it in shape for a young man, a 40-year-old man, a 50-year-old man to come down there and take it and run it and move Sylacauga forward. But the first 2 years of any man that's elected down there, whether he's elected to the council or to the mayor's job, is going to have to work to clean up the problems that exist. And there are problems down there. There are problems down there. There are economic problems. There are management problems in the building. You know, it's easier to name the things that are right in Sylacauga than it is to name the things that are wrong, because the list is so much longer on the things that are wrong. And we've just got...
How have we seemingly gotten to this point?
Well, I can tell you how we've gotten there. You know, folks will quickly say that a mayor in Sylacauga has limited power and has no power. The council has all the power. Well, I can tell you that the council certainly has the power to spend the money, and they have the power to make the ordinances down there. What the mayor has, though, is he has a pulpit to stand in and tell them when they're doing wrong, to talk to the people directly, to get the information out there, and to, in effect, shame them into doing what's right. Now, we've had mayors that were able to do that. Sam Wright was an example of that. I didn't always agree with Sam, but Sam could do that. Gene Stewart was a mayor that could do that. But Ross Payton was a mayor that could do that. But we've been on a long dry spell about mayors that had a real stiff backbone that could stand up and say, y'all are messing up, and y'all are messing up bad. This can't go on. And, you know, now Jim Heigl is my friend, and I like Jim. Jim, a good example of a failed leadership is what just happened with Jim's efforts to make changes inside City Hall and to fire the city clerk. Jim tried to fire a city clerk that he couldn't fire. Well, how do you think that makes all the employees feel that are around them when you've got a mayor that didn't get the right information up front to figure out whether he even had the authority? Because to shoot your gun and miss is always worse than to shoot your gun and hit the target. Well, he just completely missed the target. And so now you've got an employee that he has to work closely with that he has attempted to fire, been told by the Civil Service Board and the lawyers that you can't fire this person. And that, I do not address whether or not this person should have been fired or should not have been fired. That's not for me to say. But you can't go half-cocked. And Jim has done the best job he could, but it's time for a change. It's just time for a change.
Mike Lander is our guest this morning here on Daybreak, announcing his candidacy for the mayor's office coming up in August. And, you know, here we are late February, so it's not that far away, so we've got to hit the ground running. This is your last freebie, by the way.
I appreciate, you know, as I've been, it was said commonly when I was growing up in Fayetteville, I can afford all the free I can get. Yeah, I'm not, I certainly am not looking for a free ride.
Can this be fixed, though?
Yeah, it can be fixed, but now it's, you know, it's kind of like cleaning out a septic tank. It ain't gonna be, it's gonna stink when you're doing it, and it's gonna get you dirty when you're doing it. But hey, I don't mind hard work, and I don't mind for the benefit of Sylacauga to do it. You know, I've grown up here, even though I'm from Fayetteville, and you know all about Fayetteville, you kin folks down there at Fayetteville, I've been here all my life. Do I want to see Sylacauga like it is now? Do I want to see all the infighting down there? No, I don't want to see that. And let me tell you something else. And this just crossed my mind because this is something that has bothered me. And I certainly recognize that in this country and with free speech, folks can do and say almost anything. But I'm going to tell you what, if you're working for the city or you're working for the county, or you're working for the state, or you're working for the federal government, and you're taking a check from them, and you don't believe in supporting their cause, and you don't believe in saluting that flag of the United States of America and the ideals that it stands for, don't take the money. Don't take the job, because you have signed an oath. You have taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. If you don't want to do that, and you want to be on the distaff side, and you want to be out here, and you want to be woke, and you want to be anti-police, hey, get your permit and protest all you want to. I can tell you that if I were elected mayor or I became king today, I would never sell the police nor the first responders, the fire department, the first responders short, because I know that those groups are what separates us from anarchy. You just don't want to be in a world where there's not that thin blue line and those first responders. I also support the military because, let me tell you what, this is a cruel world, and if you don't look around and see what's happened in Israel, it can happen here. It would have happened here had we not had a change. So I'm going to tell you, Jimmy, if you were to elect me mayor, and I'm talking to the folks, you folks that are out there, you know, you need to, even though municipal races are by law in Alabama, by state law, are nonpartisan. That means you don't have to identify, the candidate doesn't identify as a Democrat or a Republican. Right. But I'm going to tell you something. I don't even have to say I'm a Republican, which I am, but I'm going to tell you this. Sylacauga is, has been, and always will be a Republican town. It started with Brodie Reed. I don't know if you ever knew Miss Brodie, but no. Brodie Reed started, she came here with Kimberly Clark, her husband, and she was one of the first Republicans when there wasn't any Republicans. But Republicans stand for conservative government. And anybody that won't stand up and say that they want less government, they're not thinking right. We've seen what happens when you get more and more government. You lose your freedom and you become dependent on that money that flows from the government. And that's got to stop. And in Sylacauga, all I can promise you if I'm mayor is I'll clean up the problem and try to fix the problem, but it ain't going to be pretty.
4 years.
4 years. That's all I would want. You know, at some point, I want to quit letting folks. You know, a longtime friend of mine, Lyndall Bolton, once said, and I thought a lot of what Lyndall said. He said, you know, old buddy, the higher you climb up the totem pole, the cleaner the shot you give all those down below at your butt going up. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. I could go home. Pam and I are blessed. We don't have to work. We don't have many worries other than sometimes a health issue. We worry about our grandchildren, but they're doing well. Our children are doing well. But I can tell you that what I want to see Sylacauga do well, and if I didn't want that, because I don't need a job, but if I didn't want that, I wouldn't invite folks to talk about me, to talk about my past, because, you know, I've done everything that you could do to clean up mistakes I've made. I've cleaned them up, but folks still talk. And hey, I'm so dang tough that it doesn't bother me. Let them talk.
Appreciate you coming by this morning.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I want to tell you something. Your show does a lot of good because it lets folks know what's going on, and sometimes we don't get as much information out of City Hall as we need, and if you go down there, they may present you a bill before they want to give you any information, and they're entitled if you want records, but there shouldn't be any secrets down there. Not only should you be able to see through the windows in the building, you should be able to see through what they're doing inside the building. And sometimes that's not the case down there.
Mike Landers announcing his candidates for mayor of the city of Sylacauga coming up in August. Mike, always a pleasure. Thanks for dropping by.
Thank you, Jimmy.
All right, more Daybreak coming up right after you watch this.